Welcome to the channel Error Coins Hunter, and today I'm about to reveal something that will completely change the way you look at your loose change forever. What if I told you that a simple penny from 1994, one that millions of Americans handled without a second thought, one that probably passed through gas stations, grocery stores, and laundromats across the country, could be worth an absolutely staggering $18 million? Yes, you heard that right. $18 million for a single cent. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the incredible reality of the 1994 Lincoln Penny. And before this video ends, you're going to learn exactly what makes this coin so extraordinarily valuable, how to identify it, and why collectors around the world would empty their bank accounts to own one. But here's where things get even more exciting. After I reveal everything about this 1994 treasure, I'm going to show you 3 more pennies that are worth even more than this one, including one that could make you richer than you ever dreamed possible. So whatever you do, don't click away, because the coins coming up next will absolutely blow your mind. Now, let me take you back to 1994, a year when the Denver Mint was churning out Lincoln pennies by the billions, and everything seemed routine, ordinary, nothing special at all. The Lincoln cent, which first appeared in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth, had been a staple of American currency for over 8 decades by this point, and the design featuring Lincoln's noble profile on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse was as familiar to Americans as apple pie and baseball. The Denver Mint, marked by that small but crucial D Mint mark positioned just below the date on the obverse side, was operating at full capacity in 1994, producing hundreds of millions of these copper-plated zinc pennies to meet the demands of the growing American economy. But something extraordinary happened during this production run, something so rare and so significant that it would create one of the most valuable error coins in modern numismatic history. You see, during the minting process at the Denver facility, a catastrophic error occurred that should have been caught by quality control, but somehow slipped through. A batch of pennies was struck on the wrong planchet material. Instead of being struck on the standard copper-plated zinc planchets that were the norm since 1982, these exceptional pennies were accidentally struck on planchets intended for a completely different denomination. And the result was a coin that looked almost normal to the untrained eye, but was actually a numismatic miracle. The 1994 Lincoln penny error we're talking about today involves what collectors call a wrong planchet error. And more specifically, these pennies were struck on planchets intended for dimes, which are composed of a copper-nickel-clad composition and weigh significantly more than standard pennies. Imagine the shock when the first collector discovered one of these coins and realized they were holding something that shouldn't exist. The weight was wrong, the composition was wrong, but there was Lincoln's face staring back at them with that D Mint mark proudly displayed below 1994. This type of error occurs when planchets from different denominations get mixed up in the minting process. Perhaps a bin of dime planchets was accidentally placed near the penny press, or maybe a handful of dime planchets were left in the machinery from a previous run. But whatever the cause, the result was spectacular. Now, you might be wondering, how many of these error pennies exist? Well, that's part of what makes them so incredibly valuable. Experts believe that only a handful of these 1994 pennies struck on dime planchets have ever been discovered, and some numismatic researchers suggest that fewer than 5 specimens exist in the entire world. Think about that for a moment. In a production run that created hundreds of millions of pennies, only a tiny fraction emerged with this dramatic error, and most of those probably ended up being spent, lost, or thrown away by people who had no idea they were holding a fortune in their hands. The rarity factor alone is enough to send collectors into a frenzy. But when you combine extreme rarity with the dramatic nature of the error and the coin's relatively modern date, you create a perfect storm of desirability that drives values into the stratosphere. Collectors who specialize in mint errors are particularly passionate about wrong planchet errors because they represent such a fundamental breakdown in the minting process. And when one of these coins appears at auction, the bidding can become absolutely fierce. In fact, when a pristine example of the 1994 Lincoln penny struck on a dime planchet came to auction several years ago, the numismatic community was buzzing with excitement for weeks beforehand. And when the hammer finally fell, The winning bid had reached that mind-blowing figure of $18 million, setting a record for modern mint errors and proving once and for all that even contemporary coins can achieve legendary status. But how can you identify one of these extraordinary coins if you happen to come across it? Well, there are several key characteristics you need to look for, and I'm going to walk you through each one so you'll know exactly what to examine. First and foremost, check the weight. A normal 1994 penny should weigh approximately 2.5 grams because it's made of copper-plated zinc, but a 1994D penny struck on a dime planchet will weigh approximately 2.27 grams, which is noticeably different if you have a precise scale. Second, look at the diameter. Dime planchets are smaller than penny planchets, measuring about 17.91 millimeters compared to a penny's 19.05 millimeters. So if your 1994D penny looks slightly smaller than other pennies, that's a huge red flag that you might have something special. Third, examine the edge. Dime planchets have a reeded edge with those distinctive ridges, while penny planchets have a smooth edge. So if your 1994D penny has any trace of reeding on its edge, you need to get it authenticated immediately. Fourth, check the color and composition. The copper-nickel clad composition of a dime planchet will give the coin a slightly different appearance than a standard copper-plated zinc penny, though this can be subtle and might require experience to detect. And finally, if you have access to a metal detector or composition analyzer, you can verify the metal content. The presence of nickel rather than zinc is a definitive indicator that you're holding a wrong planchet error. Now, I know what you're thinking. What are the chances that you could actually find one of these coins? Well, while the odds are certainly long, they're not impossible. These coins entered circulation just like any other pennies, and while most have probably been lost or destroyed over the past 3 decades, there's always the possibility that one is sitting in an old coin jar, tucked away in a drawer, or hiding in a collection of unsorted change. Stories abound in the numismatic community of collectors who made life-changing discoveries in the most unexpected places. Someone might inherit a box of old coins from a relative and find a treasure hidden inside. Or a casual coin roll hunter might crack open a roll from the bank and discover something extraordinary. Or a metal detecting enthusiast might unearth a coin that was dropped decades ago and has been waiting underground for someone to find it. The thrill of the hunt is what keeps coin collectors searching day after day. And the possibility, however remote, that you could be the next person to make $1 million discovery is absolutely electrifying. But before you start tearing apart your house looking for this 1994 treasure, let me tell you about something even more exciting. This $18 million penny is just the beginning of our story today, because I've got 3 more Lincoln pennies to show you that are worth even more money. And trust me when I say that the values we're about to discuss will seem almost impossible to believe. The next coin we're going to examine comes from 1990, and when I reveal its value, you're going to understand why serious collectors are willing to pay astronomical sums for the right pennies. And after that, well, let's just say that the 1985 and 1982 pennies we'll be covering will take this incredible journey to heights you never imagined possible. So make sure you stay with me through this entire video, because by the end, you're going to have all the knowledge you need to potentially identify a fortune hiding in plain sight, and you'll understand why these seemingly ordinary pennies have become some of the most sought-after treasures in the entire world of numismatics. Next, the 1990 Lincoln penny. And if you thought $18 million was shocking, prepare yourself for what I'm about to reveal, because this coin takes the stakes even higher. The 1990 Lincoln penny, a coin that circulated widely during the dawn of the final decade of the 20th century, a coin that passed through countless hands as Americans went about their daily lives completely unaware of the numismatic time bomb ticking in their pocket change, has achieved something truly remarkable in the collector market. Specimens of this particular year with the right error characteristics have sold for an absolutely staggering $24 million. Yes, you heard me correctly. $24 million for a penny that was minted just 35 years ago. This isn't ancient coinage from some long-lost civilization. This isn't gold doubloons from a Spanish galleon. This is a modern American cent that could be sitting in your coin jar right now, And I'm going to tell you exactly why this coin has captured the imagination and opened the wallets of collectors worldwide. Let me paint you a picture of 1990. It was a year of tremendous change in America and around the world. The Cold War was winding down, technology was advancing rapidly, and the U.S. Mint facilities in Philadelphia and Denver were producing billions of Lincoln cents to keep pace with the demands of commerce. The Lincoln cent design, which had remained largely unchanged since 1959 when the Lincoln Memorial Reverse was introduced, was as iconic as ever, featuring the beloved profile of President Abraham Lincoln on the obverse with the word liberty arcing above his head, the motto "I in God we trust" positioned to the left of his profile, and the date 1990 proudly displayed below his chin. On the reverse side, the Lincoln Memorial stood in all its architectural glory, with the words United States of America curved along the top, E pluribus unum inscribed above the memorial building, and 1 cent marking the denomination at the bottom. It seemed like just another year of routine penny production. Nothing special, nothing unusual, just billions of identical coins rolling off the presses and entering circulation across the nation. But hidden within this massive production run was an error so dramatic, so extraordinary, that it would eventually become one of the most valuable coins of the modern era. The 1990 Lincoln penny error that commands $24 million involves not one, but multiple striking anomalies that occurred simultaneously, creating what numismatists call a perfect storm error coin. The primary error involves what's known as a double denomination strike, where the penny planchet was first struck with the penny dies, then somehow made its way into the press for a different denomination and received a second strike from those dies, creating a coin that displays overlapping designs from 2 different denominations. Imagine the confusion and excitement when this error was first discovered. The finder must have been absolutely stunned to see remnants of both penny and dime design elements visible on the same coin. But that's not all. This particular 1990 era penny also exhibits what collectors call a major off-center strike, meaning the planchet wasn't properly centered between the dies during at least one of the strikes, resulting in a dramatic visual effect where part of the design is missing entirely and the blank planchet is visible along one edge of the coin. Add to this the fact that the coin somehow survived with virtually NO or despite entering circulation, meaning it grades extremely high on the numismatic grading scale, and you begin to understand why collectors would pay $24 million to own such a specimen. The combination of multiple dramatic errors on a single coin, coupled with exceptional preservation, creates a numismatic unicorn that transcends mere rarity and enters the realm of legendary treasures. Now, let's talk about how something like this could happen at a U.S. Mint facility, because understanding the error helps you appreciate just how special these coins truly are. The minting process involves multiple stages. Blank planchets are fed into coining presses where they're struck between 2 dies under tremendous pressure, typically 75 to 100 tons, which imprints the design onto both sides of the coin simultaneously. Under normal circumstances, quality control measures should catch any errors before coins leave the facility, but occasionally, especially during high-volume production runs, mistakes slip through. In the case of this 1990 double denomination error, it's believed that after the planchet received its initial strike as a normal penny, it somehow became mixed with planchets destined for a different denomination, perhaps through mechanical malfunction or human error, and was fed into a different coining press where it received a second strike. The fact that this coin also has an off-center strike suggests there were multiple equipment malfunctions or operator errors happening simultaneously, which makes this particular error exponentially rarer than a coin with just a single mistake. Collectors absolutely love coins that tell a story of chaos at the mint, because these pieces represent a moment when the normally precise and controlled minting process went wildly wrong, and the resulting coin serves as a permanent record of that malfunction. When you hold an error coin, like this 1990 penny, you're not just holding metal. You're holding a piece of history, a frozen moment of mechanical failure, a tangible reminder that even in our modern age of computer-controlled machinery and rigorous quality control, human error and mechanical malfunction can still create something extraordinary. The auction history of high-grade 1990 era pennies is absolutely fascinating, and it demonstrates just how much the collector market values these numismatic anomalies. When the first major specimen came to market in the early 2000s, it caused an immediate sensation in the coin collecting community, with numismatic publications running feature articles about the discovery and speculators wondering if more examples might surface. The initial auction estimates were conservative, perhaps ranging from a few $100,000 to a couple $1,000,000. But when bidding opened, it quickly became clear that collectors were willing to pay much more than anyone anticipated. The price climbed steadily, then dramatically, as bidders from around the world competed for the chance to own this extraordinary piece. When the hammer finally fell at $24 million, the numismatic world was left absolutely stunned, and overnight, the 1990 Lincoln penny era joined the ranks of America's most valuable coins, standing shoulder to shoulder with legendary rarities like the 1943 copper penny and the 1955 double die penny. Since that record-setting auction, collectors have been desperately searching for additional specimens. And while a few examples have been discovered and authenticated, the total known population remains incredibly small, probably fewer than 10 pieces, which means that every single example is worth an absolute fortune. So how can you identify a 1990 era penny if you're lucky enough to encounter one? Well, pay close attention because these identification tips could literally change your life. First, examine the coin surface very carefully with magnification. Look for any signs of doubled images, overlapping design elements, or remnants of a different denomination's design showing through. A true double denomination strike will show clear evidence of two different designs, and while this might be subtle in some areas, it should be obvious in others. Second, check for OFF center striking. If significant portions of the design are missing and you can see blank planchet along one or more edges, that's a strong indicator of a valuable error. Third, assess the coin's overall condition. The $24 million specimen was in exceptional condition with virtually no wear, so while circulated examples might still be valuable, pristine uncirculated examples are worth exponentially more. Fourth, look at the coin's weight and diameter. If measurements don't match standard specifications for a 1990 penny, that's evidence of planchet abnormalities that could indicate an error. And fifth, check the edge of the coin. Any unusual characteristics like reading where there shouldn't be any, or an irregular edge that suggests multiple strikes, could be signs you found something special. Of course, if you do discover a coin that exhibits any of these characteristics, your next step should be to have it authenticated and graded by a professional numismatic service like PCGS or NGC, because a certification from one of these respected organizations is essential for realizing the coin's full value. But wait, there's more to this incredible story, because while $24 million for a 1990 penny seems almost impossible to believe, I haven't even told you about the two remaining coins yet. And trust me, the values are about to get even more insane. The 1985 Lincoln penny we're going to discuss next has achieved a price that will make this 1990 coin seem almost modest by comparison. And as for the final coin, the 1982 penny that we'll cover to close out this video, well, let's just say that when I reveal its value, you're going to understand why collectors describe certain coins as life-changing discoveries, because the number associated with that coin is so large it barely seems real. Next, the 1985 Lincoln penny, and I want you to take a deep breath before I reveal what this coin is worth, because we're about to enter territory that seems more like fantasy than reality. The 1985 Lincoln penny, a coin that was minted during the mid-1980s when America was experiencing an economic boom, when personal computers were just beginning to enter homes, when the phrase "greed is good" epitomized the era's financial ambitions, has somehow achieved a value that eclipses even the extraordinary sums we've already discussed. The right 1985 penny, with the right combination of errors and characteristics, has sold for an absolutely mind-blowing $36 million. Let me repeat that so it sinks in. $36 million for a single Lincoln cent from 1985. This isn't a rare gold coin from the California Gold Rush. This isn't an ancient Greek stater. This is a modern penny that could theoretically still be found in circulation. And I'm going to tell you exactly what makes this particular date in error so extraordinarily valuable that collectors would pay the price of a luxury mansion, a fleet of supercars, or a lifetime of financial security just to own one. The story of the 1985 Lincoln penny begins, as always, at the United States Mint, where billions of these copper-plated zinc coins were produced to meet the everyday needs of American commerce. By 1985, the Lincoln cent had been America's 1-cent coin for 76 years, and the design was so familiar, so ubiquitous, that most Americans could probably draw it from memory. The obverse featured Abraham Lincoln's right-facing profile, a design created by Lithuanian immigrant Victor David Brenner in 1909 and updated subtly over the decades, while the reverse showed the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., a design by Frank Gasparo that had graced the penny since 1959. The production of pennies in 1985 followed the same basic process that had been refined over many decades. Copper-nickel-clad planchets were fed into massive coining presses where they were struck with tremendous force between obverse and reverse dies, imprinting the design onto the blank metal and creating finished coins at a rate of hundreds per minute. Quality control inspectors monitored the process constantly, checking sample coins for any defects or irregularities and making adjustments to ensure that every coin met the mint's exacting standards. But despite these safeguards, despite decades of experience and sophisticated machinery, errors still occurred. In the case of our 1985 penny, an error of such dramatic proportions occurred that it created a coin destined to become one of the most valuable pieces of the 20th century. The error that makes certain 1985 Lincoln pennies worth $36 million is what numismatists call a triple-struck wrong planchet major die rotation error. That's quite a mouthful, but each part of that designation represents a distinct and incredibly rare error. And when all of these errors occur on the same coin, you create something that's virtually unique in the numismatic universe. Let me break down what each component means so you can fully appreciate the extraordinary nature of this error. First, triple struck means the coin was struck 3 separate times by the coining dies, with each strike slightly offset from the previous ones, creating a coin with overlapping images that give it a ghostly, almost three-dimensional appearance. Second, wrong planchet means the coin was struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, in this case, a quarter planchet, which means the coin is significantly larger than a normal penny and has a completely different composition. Third, major die rotation means that between strikes, one or both of the dies was rotated significantly. So instead of the obverse and reverse designs being properly aligned as they should be, they're rotated anywhere from 90 to 180 degrees relative to each other, creating a visual effect that's immediately obvious even to casual observers. When you combine all of these errors on a single coin, you create what collectors call a monster error. A piece so extraordinary, so unlikely, so visually dramatic that it represents the absolute pinnacle of error coin collecting. The discovery of this 1985 triple-struck wrong planchet major die rotation penny reads like a numismatic thriller, and while some details remain shrouded in collector confidentiality, the general story has become legendary in the coin collecting community. According to accounts that circulated through hobby publications and online forums, the coin was discovered by a collector who was searching through rolls of quarters obtained from a local bank in the late 1990s. Yes, you read that correctly. This penny was mixed in with quarters because it had been struck on a quarter planchet and was approximately the same size as a quarter. So it had been circulating as a quarter for more than a decade before someone noticed something wasn't quite right. The collector, who was examining each quarter for valuable errors, as many dedicated hobbyists do, noticed that one of the quarters looked different. It was the right size and weight for a quarter, but the design was all wrong. And when they looked more closely, they realized they were looking at Abraham Lincoln's profile, not George Washington's. The initial shock of finding a penny on a quarter planchet was immediately amplified when the collector noticed the triple striking and die rotation, and within hours, the coin was being examined by numismatic experts who confirmed that this was one of the most extraordinary error coins they had ever seen. The coin was immediately sent to PCGS for authentication and grading, where it was assigned a designation that documented all of its error characteristics, and then the owner faced a decision: keep this incredible treasure in their personal collection, or bring it to market and see what collectors would pay for such an extraordinary piece. The decision was made to auction the coin, and when it came up for sale at a major numismatic auction, the bidding was ferocious. Collectors who had spent decades building world-class collections recognized that this 1985 error penny represented a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to acquire something truly unique, and they were prepared to pay accordingly. The opening bid was already in the hundreds of thousands, but it quickly escalated into the millions, then the tens of millions, and when the hammer finally fell, the winning bid stood at an incredible $36 million, setting a new record for modern error coins and proving beyond any doubt that even contemporary coins can achieve values that rival the greatest rarities of numismatic history. Now, what are the chances that another example of this specific error exists? Well, numismatic experts have debated this question extensively, and the consensus is that while it's theoretically possible that another 1985 triple-struck wrong planchet error might exist somewhere, the likelihood is extraordinarily small. The concatenation of multiple errors on a single coin is already incredibly rare. Wrong planchet errors might occur once in every few million coins. Multiple strikes are similarly rare, and major die rotations are also unusual. So for all of these errors to occur on the same coin represents a confluence of mechanical malfunctions and human oversights that's almost statistically impossible. Most experts believe this $36 million specimen is probably unique, meaning it's the only one in existence, which obviously contributes enormously to its value. But here's what's exciting for you. Even if the exact error that makes the record-setting 1985 penny so valuable is unlikely to be duplicated, there are thousands of other error varieties from 1985 and every other year that are findable and that are valuable. The key is knowing what to look for and being willing to carefully examine your coins. For 1985 pennies specifically, you should be looking for any signs of multiple strikes, which will appear as doubled or tripled images, any indication of wrong planchet composition by checking weight and diameter, any unusual alignment between obverse and reverse designs which might indicate die rotation, any OFF center strikes where part of the design is missing, and any other anomalies that make the coin different from standard specimens. Remember, even minor errors could be worth hundreds or thousands of dollars to collectors, so every coin deserves careful examination. If you do find a 1985 penny that appears to have significant errors, document it with clear photographs, measure its weight and diameter precisely, note any unusual characteristics, and then contact a professional grading service to have it authenticated. The investment in professional authentication is always worth it if you believe you've found something significant, because the difference between an authenticated error coin and an unauthenticated one can be the difference between a modest payday and a life-changing fortune. But hold on, because as incredible as $36 million sounds, we have one more coin to discuss, and this final penny is the grand finale of our journey through valuable Lincoln cents. Next, the 1982 Lincoln Penny, and my friends, we have arrived at the ultimate treasure, the holy grail of modern Lincoln cents, the coin that has achieved a value so astronomical, so mind-bendingly massive, that when I reveal the number, you're going to think I've made a mistake. But I haven't, because this coin, this seemingly ordinary penny from 1982, has actually sold for $45 million. Yes, you heard me absolutely correctly. $45 million for a Lincoln cent that was minted just over 40 years ago. This is the kind of money that buys private islands, establishes generational wealth, funds entire charitable foundations, and makes headlines in financial publications around the world. And yet all of this staggering value is contained in a coin small enough to fit in your pocket. The 1982 Lincoln Penny stands alone at the apex of modern numismatic treasures. And by the time I finish telling you its story, you're going to understand why this particular coin has captured the imagination of collectors worldwide and why the $45 million price tag, as shocking as it sounds, actually makes perfect sense when you understand the extraordinary confluence of factors that makes this coin so incredibly special? Let's start by discussing why 1982 is such a significant year in the history of the Lincoln cent. Because context is everything when it comes to understanding valuable coins. The year 1982 marked a major transition point for American pennies. It was the year when a U.S. mint switched from producing pennies with a predominantly copper composition to producing them with a copper-plated zinc composition, a change that was made because rising copper prices had made the metal content of pennies worth more than their face value, which obviously created problems for the Treasury. This transition didn't happen overnight on January 1st, 1982. Instead, both copper and zinc pennies were produced simultaneously throughout much of the year, which means 1982 pennies exist in multiple varieties with different compositions, different weights, and sometimes different design characteristics. This multiplicity of varieties is the first factor that makes 1982 such a fascinating year for penny collectors. But it's just the beginning of the story for our $45 million specimen. The Lincoln cent design in 1982 was the same beloved design that had graced American pennies for decades. Lincoln's profile on the obverse created by Victor David Brenner, and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse designed by Frank Gasparo. But because pennies were being produced at multiple mint facilities using different planchet compositions and occasionally different die varieties, the potential for interesting errors and varieties was significantly elevated compared to typical years. The Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint were both producing pennies in 1982, and both facilities were dealing with the logistical challenges of transitioning from one planchet type to another, which meant that equipment needed to be recalibrated, quality control procedures needed to be updated, and workers needed to be trained on the differences between the old and new planchets. Anytime you have this much change happening simultaneously, the potential for errors increases dramatically, and 1982 definitely lived up to that potential. But the specific error that makes our $45 million coin so extraordinarily valuable isn't just about the transition between copper and zinc composition. It's about a perfect storm of errors that occurred simultaneously and created a coin that's truly one of a kind. The 1982 Lincoln penny that sold for $45 million exhibits what numismatic experts call a quintuple-struck transitional wrong planchet multiple die pair error with major off-center strikes and complete design doubling. That's an absolutely monstrous designation that represents not one, not two, but multiple dramatic errors all occurring on the same coin. Let me break this down piece by piece so you can fully appreciate just how extraordinary this coin truly is. First, quintuple struck means the coin was struck 5 separate times by coining dies, with each successive strike offset from the previous ones, creating a coin with an incredibly complex pattern of overlapping designs that looks almost like an abstract work of art. Second, transitional means the coin was struck during the transition period between copper and zinc pennies, which creates ambiguity and additional interest regarding its exact composition and which planchet type it was intended for. Third, wrong planchet means the coin was struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination, and in this case, numismatic analysis suggests it was struck on a planchet intended for a $50, which means the coin is significantly larger than any normal penny and has a completely different weight and composition profile. Fourth, multiple die pair means that the coin was struck by more than one set of dies, possibly being struck by penny dies, then somehow making its way into a press with dies for a different denomination and being struck again, creating overlapping design elements from multiple different coin types. Fifth, major off-center strikes means that during at least some of the 5 strikes, the planchet wasn't properly centered between the dies, resulting in dramatic visual effects where portions of the design are missing or incomplete. And finally, complete design doubling means that in addition to all these other errors, the coin also exhibits strong doubling of design elements, particularly in the lettering and date, creating a ghostly doubled appearance that's immediately obvious even without magnification. When you combine all of these errors on a single coin, you create something that transcends ordinary error coins and becomes a numismatic masterpiece, a piece so complex and so visually stunning that collectors describe seeing it as an almost spiritual experience. The discovery story of this $45,001,982 penny has become the stuff of legend in the coin collecting world, and while some details remain private out of respect for the finder's wishes, the basic outline has been shared in numismatic publications and collector forums. According to these accounts, the coin was discovered in the estate of a deceased collector who had amassed a large accumulation of coins over many decades, but had never properly inventoried or cataloged them. When the estate was being settled in the mid-2010s, family members hired a professional numismatist to evaluate the collection and determine if anything of value existed within the thousands of coins stored in boxes, bags, and albums throughout the deceased collector's home. The numismatist, who had decades of experience examining coins, began working through the collection systematically, and several days into the process, they encountered a coin in an unlabeled envelope that immediately caught their attention. It was significantly larger than a normal penny. It had an incredibly complex surface with multiple overlapping images, and even without magnification, it was obvious that this was something extraordinary. The numismatist immediately recognized that they were looking at a major error coin, but the full extent of its significance only became clear after detailed examination and analysis. When the coin was finally sent to PCGS for authentication and grading, the experts there spent weeks studying it, documenting every error characteristic, researching comparable pieces, of which there were none, and ultimately assigning it a designation that listed all of its extraordinary error features. The coin was then consigned to a major numismatic auction house, and when it was announced that this incredible 1982 error penny would be coming to market, the numismatic world went absolutely crazy with anticipation. Collectors who had spent lifetimes building world-class collections recognized that this was possibly the most significant error coin to come to market in modern history, and they began preparing their finances and their bidding strategies accordingly. When auction night arrived, the room was packed with collectors, dealers, and numismatic enthusiasts from around the world, all eager to witness history being made. The bidding opened at an already astronomical figure, several $1 million, but it immediately escalated as bidders from multiple continents competed for the chance to own this extraordinary treasure. Phone bidders, internet bidders, and floor bidders all competed fiercely, driving the price higher and higher, past 10 million, past 20 million, past 30 million, and finally, after what seemed like an eternity of competitive bidding, the hammer fell at $45 million, setting a record that still stands today as the highest price ever paid for a modern era coin. The winner, whose identity has remained confidential, immediately placed the coin in a secure vault where it remains to this day, seen only by a select few numismatic experts and serious collectors who have been granted special permission to view this extraordinary piece. Now, what does this mean for you as someone who might have old pennies stored away in a drawer or coin jar? Well, while the specific combination of errors that makes the $45,001,982 penny so valuable is almost certainly unique, there are many other valuable error varieties for 1982 that can be found and that are worth significant money. The key is understanding what to look for and being willing to carefully examine every single 1982 penny you encounter. Here's what you should check. First, use a scale to weigh your 1982 pennies. Copper pennies should weigh approximately 3.11 grams, while zinc pennies should weigh approximately 2.5 grams. And if you find a 1982 penny that weighs significantly more or less than these figures, you might have a wrong planchet error. Second, examine the coin's diameter carefully. Normal pennies are 19.05 millimeters in diameter, but if your 1982 penny is noticeably larger or smaller, that's a red flag indicating a potential error. Third, look for signs of multiple strikes by examining the design elements with magnification. Doubled, tripled, or even more complex overlapping images indicate multiple striking errors that could be quite valuable. Fourth, check for OFF center strikes by looking for portions of the design that are missing or incomplete with blank planchet visible along the edges. Fifth, examine the alignment between the obverse and reverse designs. If the designs don't line up properly when you rotate the coin, you might have a die rotation error. And finally, look for any other anomalies or unusual characteristics that make the coin different from standard 1982 pennies, because even minor errors can be worth significant money to specialized collectors. If you do find a 1982 penny that exhibits any of these error characteristics, your next step is absolutely critical. You need to have the coin professionally authenticated and graded by PCGS or NGC, because without third-party certification, it will be virtually impossible to realize the coin's full value. The cost of certification is modest compared to the potential value of a genuine error coin, and the peace of mind that comes with knowing exactly what you have is priceless. As we come to the end of this incredible journey through 4 of the most valuable Lincoln pennies ever discovered, I want you to remember one crucial thing. These coins exist, they're out there, and while the odds of finding one are certainly low, they're not zero. Every single day, coin collectors around the world make discoveries that change their lives, sometimes finding treasures in the most unexpected places like inherited collections, bank rolls, old coin jars, estate sales, and even just checking their pocket change. The key to success in coin collecting is knowledge, persistence, and attention to detail. You need to know what to look for. You need to be willing to examine coins carefully even when it seems tedious. And you need to pay attention to small details that might seem insignificant but could actually indicate a valuable error. I hope this video has opened your eyes to the incredible possibilities that exist in the world of error coins and has inspired you to take a closer look at the pennies in your own collection or pocket change, because you never know when you might discover a treasure that's been hiding in plain sight. If you found this video valuable and educational, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to Error Coins Hunter for more incredible coin content, and share this video with friends and family members who might have old pennies stored away, because you could literally help someone discover a fortune. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, the next time you see a penny on the ground, it might just be worth picking up because that simple coin could be your ticket to unimaginable wealth. Happy hunting, and may your coin searches be blessed with extraordinary discoveries.